Okay. Been trying to figure out how to start this one. Normally, when I'm going to do a ramble or a rant, there's got to be some kind of inspiration or some kind of urge to do it. I'm not quite feeling the urge for this one, but maybe as I go along, I will get some of the juices flowing as the flow of consciousness kind of flows through me. See what the universe has for us. But anyway, what I wanted to talk about was this notion that somehow black women are doing us a favor by protecting us. They grow up taught to protect black men. Maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe it's something that I haven't seen because it wasn't the way that way when I was a child, even though that's been a few decades ago. My sisters were never taught to protect me. I've got two daughters and they're grown now, and I've never taught them to protect their brother or look after their brother. And for the most part, I've never heard that. Maybe there's something that has to do with modern feminism, where they want the women to take on the protector and provider role. Perhaps that's where it comes from. But there's this notion that black women don't need to do anything for the black community, or they don't need to be involved with the black community or stand for the black community or be race first or whatever it is that they think that they can actually escape from. And I'm just wondering where the hell does that come from, especially in the country that you live in the country's history. We're not even talking about ancient history. We're talking about recent history of the clash between the dominant society and the subculture we call black. Black Lives Matter and all these other groups didn't come up out of nowhere. This stuff has been here. The only reason we know about Black Lives Matter is because of social media and George Soros's money. I talk to people here in Los Angeles that are involved with this struggle on a daily basis and have been in this struggle on a daily basis for 30, 35 years. This is not new. But for our wayward sisters that have it in their mind that all of a sudden the world has changed and there's a new dawn where they can be quote unquote sovereign women or crafty black women in this environment that's 400 years old, this culture that's 400 years old. Let's just start is with a history lesson. Okay, let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to policy, because a lot of times, I think what's going on with these women, especially nowadays, they've been taught bullshit history. Now, when I'm a child of the civil rights. Okay, I wasn't of age, but I can remember it. I was in school when this stuff was going on, so we got taught a little bit more real history than what I think this watered down version that they've given the Xers and even the millennials. That all of a sudden they come up with this feel good bullshit history. Let's start. Let's just start from the beginning. Now, this is something I learned a long time ago that has recently been reaffirmed. In the United States, especially in the colonies, the British colonies that were founded here, white people, one, there wasn't enough of them. Yet at the time, there wasn't enough of them because they had just gone through the Dark Ages with plagues and whatnot. There weren't a lot of Europeans that were just starting to build their ranks. They got lucky and found fresh land that had just come out of the North American continent, had just come out of an ice age. So it was sparsely populated. There wasn't a lot of people here. So they have found basically what they call virgin land compared to where they came from. But there was not enough people to what they call exploit the land. There was barely enough people there on the continent of Europe to feed themselves. They needed everybody, every hand they could find. So they didn't have enough people to exploit the land. In fact, some of the first colonists basically almost starved to death. If it wasn't for the kindness of the Native Americans, the peoples that were actually here, They would have starved to death, and the American continent would have never got going. Lucky for them. But quickly they found out that they couldn't bribe enough people to come over onto a undeveloped land. That was a strange, undeveloped land, different culture and all that stuff. They couldn't find enough Europeans to come over and do it. And they couldn't find enough Europeans in jail that owed enough for them to do it. So basically, they had to do what? To exploit it, and for them to survive, they had to import labor. And especially since the South was similar to West Africa, they started importing people from there. Now, in the beginning, as Quigley points out, and a few others have pointed out, Northern Europeans are not don't have a Mediterranean tradition. They have a Protestant tradition, which is based on peasants and landlords, which is a lot like Jim Crow that they developed later on, where you have feudal peasantry, where you work 3 days for the landlord, or 3 or 4 days for the landlord, and the other 3 days are yours, and on basically a Sunday is a holy day. So they didn't have not a word for slavery. They didn't have a tradition for slavery. So the first people, the Africans they brought over here, were basically treated like the regular humans or the regular peasants that would come over from Europe. They were brought over as seven year indentured servants. So even though they were purchased as bond servants, as slaves, they could only be kept for 7 years, and then they had to be apprenticed, and you had to give them wages and a plot of land to actually work so they can actually survive. You owe that to them because that was the peasant tradition. You converted him from a slave to an apprentice to basically a peasant that working on a plot of your land. But since peasants are basically born and are free in Europe, to purchase one from the African continent cost. And basically slavery, just like feudal peasantry, is an economic system. The cost was too high for the average owner to recoup his wages or recoup his costs in 7 years. So as an economic resolution, they decided to adopt something that wasn't in their culture, which is Spanish and Portuguese slavery, which is lifetime. And there were debates about whether that was allowable in their culture. And according to Protestant culture, it was immoral to do what? Enslave another human being. How did they get around that? They deemed that the black slave coming over from Africa, the savage, was not a human being. They were cattle or chattel. So by an edict and by developing the culture, or the policy became the culture. Policy was that you could enslave you could own these people who are not humans in perpetuity. And just like you own a cow for life, and you breed a cow for life, and you own the cow's offspring, black people or black human beings were reduced to animals as subhuman, which even today it still carries over in the culture of a lot of white people. Black people are not quite human, especially black men. Now that tradition grew and grew and grew, and as men do, or as people do, they revolt, and the men revolt. Now, Nat Turner and Venmark DC, there's lots and lots and lots of examples of people and men revolting. It's to be expected. They know it's going to happen. But there was an event that changed everything, that caused what we call today, or called then, and even still they call the Negro problem, or to do with black folks. And that event didn't happen in the United States. It happened in Haiti. It's called the Haitian Revolution. I do believe it's 1815. I think the Haitian Revolution defeated the French and drove the French and the white landowners off the island of Haiti. Haiti was a very profitable island for the French, and people were afraid that this was going to spread because you had all these rich white people on boats fleeing for their lives to the mainland of the United States with news of this black uprising and the slaughter of white people, and it made the white people here afraid because they had bred so many slaves, so many black people, that 1 out of 5 people were black. So then there became the Negro question. What do you do with black people? What do you do with the black people that are already free? And what do you do with the slaves that are soon going to be free? Because they looked over on the continent and they saw the Industrial Revolution putting people out of work, driving the peasants off the land and into the factories. And it doesn't take a leap to see that that's going to come here, because now you in the North, you have the same industry, you have the same factories. So you know that at some point slavery is going to end. And the more slaves you breed, the more bigger the problem is going to be. And as with any society, when you have a unwanted population, there's 3 things that you can do to them. First, ship them someplace else, away from your land, away from your borders, and far enough away where they cannot cause you any harm or trouble. It's number 1. The second thing is what? To reduce their numbers, cutting down on their birth rates, sterilizing them. And if you're like the Third Reich, Germany, which is basically cleanse them altogether. We call that the Holocaust. You just wholesale kill all of them, men, women, and children altogether, and eliminate the population. They did that to the American Indians. They culled the herd. The third thing is assimilate them, which is slowly breed them in to the dominant population. Now, they tried the first thing. Liberia, which was was purchased by the African Colonial Society under James Monroe, which was, I can't remember which president he was. I think he was like maybe our 10th president, might be the 5th or 6th president. But he and the African Colonial Society purchased land in Liberia and wanted to start sending freed black men and freed black slaves to Liberia. Because of lack of funding and lack of organization, that flopped, even though Liberia is still there today. But the policy was always to do what? Get rid of these black people as they were freed. What I didn't know about, and what was described to me in great detail by some very good white scholars, that this thought carried through even into the former Whig Abraham Lincoln, who had the same policy, who was also a racist. There were a lot of people against slavery in the North and the South for 2 very good reasons that's never even stated. Is one, that slavery was in direct competition to the Industrial Revolution and the factory society. And 2, the more slavery you have under the chattel slavery that was practiced in the United States, the more black slaves or black people you bred, and the bigger the problem got. Whereas freed men and women had less children, and there were less of a competition to regular farmers and factories. That was the reason that Abraham Lincoln was against slavery. He was against extending slavery westward as the United States, their landmass actually grew, and they slowly basically took land away from the Indians. He didn't want any more slave states because slave states perpetuated more black people, and the problem actually grew. And what Lincoln wanted, even back then, what most white people wanted was a white European country. Slaves had their piece because the South and developed raw materials, and those raw materials couldn't be extracted except through the people that are already doing the job, which were slaves. So Lincoln didn't fight a war to free you. He fought a war to stop the extension of slavery, the big buildup of more slaves, and two, he didn't want South Carolina and the other states to leave the Union because of tariffs. Lincoln thought that, like everybody else thought of the day, that slavery was a necessary evil for the economy of the United States. You can't have a industrial revolution and factories without raw materials. Where the raw materials come from, they came from the South, that was actually extracted by slaves, by black people. So even after the Civil War and the South was quenched and secession was actually taken off the table by force, they finally realized that what they still need those people where they are in the South is sharecropper. So even though Lincoln wanted to send black people away lock, stock, and barrel, in fact, they purchased land in Haiti to send you down there to Haiti and the Dominica. And also he purchased land in Belize, what is now known as Belize, for black people. That's how come you have lots and lots and lots of former black slaves living in Belize. I think they sent from 5,000 to 10,000 freed black slaves to Belize. So that after Jim Crow was introduced in the late 19th century, after Reconstruction flops, they decide to keep you. They decide to, since they have to keep you, to make you productive. And that goes on for a while until what? You basically get this population explosion in Europe. And you have a lot of Europeans out of work that are desperate to come where? Come west, where they have an opportunity. All of a sudden, you don't need labor because you have factories. Machinery is starting to take the place of black people. So to keep black people from reproducing, they try various methods. That's what the Planned Parenthood was about, to keep the unwanted masses from reproducing faster than white people. So that is the second plank they were trying. There's plenty of records of black women going in for routine whatever and being surgically sterilized. A big series of big complaints about that, where Planned Parenthood wasn't able to replicate itself. But after Margaret Sanger and their ilk in the 30s couldn't get it done, you go into the second half of how do you call the herd, reduce the population, which they call a genocide now. You kill them. But after the 1930s and a person called Adolf Hitler and the Germans beat them to the punch about how to ethnically cleanse, and they killed 20 some odd million people, undesirable people. You're down to your third option, which is assimilation, which is where we are now. Assimilation basically started in the 1940s. In 1944, after the war, when a lot of black men brought back a lot of white brides from Europe. And since you could not kill them and you needed the black men for as a military force, they decided that they couldn't do the final solution. So their only solution was to basically bring the black people into the white collective, which is an assimilation, which started in the 40s in the military under Truman and Eisenhower. President Truman basically signed the presidential order to integrate or desegregate the military. But as they were, it was a law that was passed, didn't have any teeth until General Eisenhower basically assumed the presidency. It was Eisenhower that started the desegregation process in 1952, where he fully desegregated the military. Eisenhower was president for what? Brown versus the Board of Education. Because the second plank of assimilation is to what? Is to socialize, especially under the Prussian school system that was implemented in the 1860s to do what? Socialize the peasants, European peasants coming over from Europe. So they would be socialized into becoming what? Americans instead of Germans, Italians, British, Irish, whatever they were. They were socialized into thinking of themselves as white Americans. So if you want to socialize black people, you have to do what? Integrate them into what? The school system. So Brown versus the Board of Education was passed, was upheld. And Little Rock Nine and everything else was done what? Under force of arms by who? Eisenhower. The integration process, the assimilation process did not start in the 60s. It started in the 40s. It got passed on to Kennedy, which took up the mantle as presidents do. They had already talked about it. Their goal is to assimilate the Negro and get rid of the Negro question, get rid of the problem of the 20th century, as W.E. Du Bois once said, which is the color line. How do you get rid of it? Civil rights is no more than the extensions of the assimilation process that started in 1945. So after Kennedy's assassinated, President Johnson decides to do what? Find out how you can get rid of the troublesome Negro problem. It had always been a problem. Black people have always protested and revolted. They did it with the Pullman Porter strike. They revolted. Sharecroppers. There's a very famous story about sharecroppers trying to organize in the 1920s. They tried to form a sharecroppers union. And guess what? 300 sharecroppers, 300 or 400 sharecroppers lost their lives. In fact, there's a very famous picture where this very big tree that has about 30 bodies swinging from ropes in it, where they hung the sharecroppers and their families as a lesson to all the other black folks that wanted to get off the land. That's what started the Great Migration. But to continue forward, 1964 under President Johnson was no more than the continuation of the assimilation process. That's why the Monahan report was so important, was so ideal of a document, because he was asked, how do you assimilate these people? What is it going to take to bring these people in line so that they can be absorbed by the white collective? That's what the civil rights was about. How do you have this 200-year-old problem starting all the way back in 1822 carried forward about what do you do with the Negro problem? The only quill they have left in their arsenal is what? Is assimilation. 50 years later and 200 years later from when the problem first started, black women are doing no more than carrying out the policy that was already set. You could not swirl. You could not assimilate. You could not escape the black community or the black neighborhood unless what? Unless a dominant culture allowed you to. And most of the dominant culture doesn't really want to. This is a forced policy, just like feminism is a forced policy. Feminism is a joke without the force of law behind it. Assimilation is a joke without the force of law behind it. You are doing no more than doing what? Following the policy that's already set for you. You've been indoctrinated by the schools, by what your little feminist teacher said. They set you next to little white boys and told you that what? You were supposed to assimilate. Why do you think this stuff is on TV? You think this stuff comes out of someplace out of an accident? Why do you think it's in your college courses? Why do you think that it's in public? Why do you think Barack Obama was trying to stop a race war? The race war is not caused by black people and white people. The race war is caused by Washington, D.C. trying to force us together because there's going to be friction. Because after 300 years of telling white people that black people were less than human, that kind of teaching and culture does not disappear overnight. That's what Monahan was trying to tell them back in the day. Affirmative action was supposed to be jobs for black men so that they could heal their families, so they could bring their families in line with everybody else. The only reason you talk about that you don't owe the black community anything, you don't owe the black man anything. You know how many black men died in a war, in the Civil War, in protest, in revolutions, on union lines, or being hung because they're trying to escape the South, or being beaten and killed in northern cities, working themselves in death in polluted areas so that they can bring their families and their people out of the situation that they were in. Black women never did that. You know how many black men got pulled out of their houses and were never seen again because they wanted to stand up to white people, stand up to injustice? Do you know how many black women were actually out there marching with Martin Luther King? Not very many, because they wouldn't let you, because they knew how dangerous it was. And if women did march, where did they march? They marched in the center of the crowd, where they were away from dogs, and they were away from the billy clubs and the pistols that white men have. And now that you got your emancipation, you got your nice little corporate job, which you got in league with the feminists that you took away from your men, that you allowed her to take away from your man and take food out of your family's mouths. You got your feminist education, and now you want to you want to take your privilege, and now do you want to jump the fence, which is fine. You jumping the fence is fine. You doing that, but say the fuck that you don't owe black men shit. That's where I have a problem with it. That's where I have a problem with that idea that you don't know black men shit. Where the fuck do you get off saying that you don't know your fucking ancestors? 200 years of their bodies being buried. You think they hung? Do you think you think they hung women? They hung black businessmen. They were trying to pull their families up, trying to pull their communities up. Why the fuck do you think black men had to escape? They weren't killing black women on the road trying to go places. Now you can take the privilege, you can take what was given to you by 300 years of struggle. You can do that. That's your privilege, because that is your inheritance from all the black people that died. All the black men that laid down their lives for you, that took the bullet for you. Martin Luther King got a bullet through his head. I didn't see Coretta next to him lying there bleeding. Malcolm X got a bullet in his head. I didn't see his wife next to him bleeding. All them Black Panthers that had to escape or were shot in their beds, that took on this power structure face to face. We're not even talking about all the black soldiers that volunteered in the Civil War to get you out of slavery because they saw a chance to get their people free. We ain't talking about them that served and died and proved themselves on the battlefield to this white man. We're not talking about all the fucking veterans that went to war in World War I to prove themselves that black people were just as good as white people, and prove themselves that the black race was able and ready to do things. I don't see no black female bodies buried in some foreign soil with bullets in them. I didn't see black women over there dying in World War II or North Korea or Vietnam. How many black men got killed as freedom riders down south, and were buried never to be seen again because they protested or got hung on a tree? So for you to freaking fix your mouth, say that you know your ancestors shit, you know what? I wish to God I could get you some bleaching cream so you could take that black skin off, give you some blue eyes, and you could go ahead and pass. You're allowed to assimilate. You're allowed to go across. It's nothing that you did. That stuff was fought for a long time ago. This is the truce that was drawn. This is the policy that was drawn. You just happen to be able to take advantage of it. But to spit on the memory of your ancestors by saying that you don't owe the black community shit. You sit in your Section 8 housing. You take your welfare, your food stamps, and your whatnot, just like any other American, because that was fought for. That was fought for inch by black people, by black men that had to prove themselves. Black men didn't get shit because they felt sorry for us. Black men didn't get shit because massa slept with us. Black men proved themselves on the battlefield. Black men proved themselves in the factory. Black men proved themselves in the workforce. Black men proved themselves on the field of sports. Jack, I didn't see no black woman get spit upon for playing fucking baseball or get spit upon playing fucking football so that you could go to the fucking white universities. Massa didn't allow us in their house because we were men. Black men still have to prove themselves every day. Black women have a tradition of going to school because there's black families that sacrifice themselves to send them there. It's one thing that you accepted the white man's goodies. Okay, you did. Fine. He didn't give them to you out of the kindness of his heart. He didn't give them to you because you're a woman and he likes your coochie. He didn't give them to you for that. He gave them to you because those were fought for. Men died for that shit. Your ancestors died for that shit. And now you sit up there on your high horse like all of a sudden you earned it on your own. Bullshit. No people rises on a single person. That takes generations and generations. White people will tell you that. Talk to your white people, talk to your Asians, talk to your Jews. They'll tell you they are just an example of what went on them for generations. And for you to spit on your black men, half the time because you chose them, half the time it's because you raised them like that. And then you're going to spit on black men and say you don't owe them shit. You don't owe the black community shit. It's one thing to pronounce it. It's another thing to say it. And that's what makes me mad. It sickens me. It sickens me for all the people that struggle to get you where you are. You didn't fucking get here by your goddamn self. You didn't raise one pistol. You didn't fight no white people. You didn't go through the gauntlet. You didn't even fucking grow up in racism. This bullshit that we call milquetoast prejudice. You didn't grow up in no racism. You didn't grow up where you had to walk down the street and hide the fields when some cracker in his fucking pickup truck rolled across and pointing guns at you. So now everything is mellowed out. So now we're sovereign black women. We don't owe the black community shit. The black community is done. We're gonna go on that side. It sickens me. If you don't have the respect for the black men of this generation, at least have respect for the fucking black men that laid down their lives and laid down their labor to get you where the fuck you are now. That's the least fucking thing that you can do. Shut the fuck up, take your goodies and go on. If you want to down the black men that you happen to be laying up with and had babies by, that's fine. But to spit on the black community that birthed you, that kept you alive, the reason that you can even go marry a white man is because there's people that fought for that shit? Are you fucking kidding me? You're doing it because they allowed you to do it. You're doing it because you're following government policy like good little niggers. They want you to do it. Why you think you're allowing them to carve up your communities? You're not going to have any. So you're going to have to live with white people. And you're going to have to be good little black folks. And you're going to have to put up racism because you ain't going to have no place to go back to. That's a dirty little secret. That's a dirty little secret that carries in and everybody else is not telling you. It's not telling you swirlers. And the swirlers aren't even talking about it because they tolerate it. You can marry out any place you want to, but guess what? You're still going to have to encounter that racism. You got to encounter it in school. You got to encounter it at the workplace, and you got to encounter it in your daily life, especially if you're in that area. Why do you think the marriage rate of black women marrying out is only fucking 3%? It's been 3% since the 1950s. Why do you think it hasn't increased? Why do you think it hasn't increased? Because 90% or 97% of black women knows what the fuck they have to put up with if they go over to the other side and they don't want to put up with it. So they'd rather stay over here and deal with the knuckleheads if they have to. Or be alone if they have to, because they don't want to deal with that shit. I'm in the swirling capital of the United States. I talk to the women every day. Why do you think black people still cluster around each other? Why do you think even in the swirling capital of the United States that black people still cluster and still want to be amongst each other? Because they don't want to deal with that fucking racism, that low-key bullshit that they have to deal with on a daily basis. Difference between you and black men is black men know it because the cops are going to make sure that they're aware of it. Because that's also that has been passed down, the fear of black men. Going all the way back to the Haitian Revolution. This is not new. And like I said, the black community is not done. Why is it not done? Because you're going to carry it right along with you. You're going to carry it right along with you until white daddy forces it out of you. Eventually he will. If he's allowed to stand long enough, if white supremacy is allowed to stand long enough, eventually he will. Everybody's going to have to marry out because there won't be enough of a black community to hold together anyway, because they will assimilate you. And you would think with all the millions of degrees that black women have in sociology and history and all the little soft sciences that they couldn't come up with this. They couldn't tell you this. They couldn't give you the real. You got all these black female authors. Where's their work? I'm a nobody. I don't have 3 letters behind my name. I can figure this shit out. You're buying weaves. You're trying to live the lifestyle. You're not educating your children. You're not defending your boys. If you would just, you know what? If you would just defend your boys, you know the fucking schooling system is not conducive for your boys. White women have figured that shit out. White women will go to that school and defend their boys because they know that those boys have to do work. And if they don't defend their boys, there will be no husbands for women to marry. It hasn't dawned on black people yet. It hasn't dawned on black women yet. There's no way that you should allow a white feminist to teach your fucking boys because they hate him and they're afraid of him. The only thing that black men are good for as far as white women are concerned is the same thing that you want him for, which is something that you won't admit. The reason you keep falling in the same freaking trap over and over again because you don't see the black man as a provider. He's a sex partner. He's there to provide a stud service to you. That's something that you won't admit. That's been handed down from slavery. But at least back then, the educated women knew that men were trained to be in blue collar. So if you wanted to get married, you marry a blue collar man. No big deal. But you want to be white women so bad, you try to apply white women's logic to a fucked up culture instead of changing the culture, which you could easily do. Where was I? If you're really serious about it, if you were really serious about changing your lives, I mean, really, if you wanted to make a difference, if you wanted to honor your ancestors, even if you don't want to help black men, fuck, we can understand that. We're already grown. There's nothing you can do for us any goddamn way. It is what it is. But if you have boys, the least you can do is give your fucking boys a fighting chance. If you're not going to give your fucking boys a fighting chance, give those boys to somebody else. If you really want to be happy, you really want to be complete, because a lot of this shit is fucking guilt. It's guilt. You can jump on the other side. You can be with that white man, but it's a lot of guilt because guess what? You leave the people that you left on the other side is eating at you because you haven't done anything. You want to get on the mic. You want to promote women to be happy and fend for themselves. It's never going to happen because that guilt is going to get you every time you see a black man get shot. Every time you see that woman, that girl gets shot with her babies. Every time you see them, a riot in the community, the question is going to come back to you. What the fuck have you done? You know, you're not even down there. You know, if you're going to marry the white guy, at least have you and the white man go down and protest the school board, get a better education for these boys. Hell, separate the boys. They have a very good platform with the Chicago Institute for Boys. They graduate 100%. 100% of them go to college on scholarships. But you're so jealous-hearted and you're so elitist because that's the way your family has taught you that you won't allow it. You won't replicate it someplace else so that your boys can actually elevate themselves and the boys can actually have enough tools and strength to bring you up out of the black community up out of its morass, because only the men can, only the men can bring the community up out of its morass. Women can't fucking do it, because if you could have done it, as much education as you've had, as much money as the United States has poured into you, it would have happened already. But the thing is, you're arguing about how you look. You're arguing about what a black man's preference of who gives a fuck if a grown ass man, a grown ass black man wants to fuck a white woman, or a grown ass man wants to fuck a light skinned woman. Who gives a fuck? That's not your fucking mission. Your fucking mission is to leave this earth for your children better than what you found it. You're not supposed to be stepping on the black man's neck to elevate yourself. You're supposed to be raising your children. You're supposed to be standing tall and him standing tall so that your children can stand on your shoulders and do better. It's not black man do better. You do better. You can blame the black man from here to eternity about his fucked up behavior and his fucked up culture because he had fucked up parents, which happened to be you and your mother and her fucked up choices. Stop bending over, looking at the goddamn ground and looking at the end of your fucking nose. Look up, see what you can do. And it doesn't take that much. It doesn't take that much to talk to the little 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 10-year-old boy and tutor him once a week or twice a week. Hell, you can do that shit on Skype. It doesn't take that much to talk to a little girl or show up someplace at a center or tell your church to have a center where you can come in and counsel little girls or little boys. Half of these little guys are running around doing bad shit because they feel that nobody fucking cares. When I was a kid, if I did something, I knew somebody cared because my neighbor would come knock on my mother's door if I was cutting up, if I was doing something wrong. Or my neighbor, if I knew that I was hungry and I was going to school hungry, they'd give me $1. You'll give a bum $1 before you give a little black boy $1 so he can have something to eat, so he can learn something. You'll stand there and watch the little boy get jumped on and be happy about it rather than walking in and standing there and ask them what they're doing. The greatest example that I saw about cleaning up your fucking community one person at a time, and I'm going to tell you what it was. I was driving, coming home from a friend of mine's funeral. Driving next, LA has a lot of freeways. Especially in the poor neighborhoods, there's freeways and people throw out trash. And there was a homeless Hispanic woman, little bitty old woman, Hispanic woman. No, she was homeless because she had the little cart with all her stuff in it. It made me feel bad because you know what she was doing? She wasn't talking about how bad she had it. She wasn't feeling sorry for herself. You know what the fuck she was doing? She was taking her broom, a little old raggedy broom that she had, and she was sweeping off the sidewalk. She was getting rid of the trash and the dirt of where she had her of the freeway that she lived under. It didn't belong to her. It was the city's job to clean it up. She had nothing. She had less than nothing. She didn't speak English. She had a cart full of junk. She didn't have a place to stay. She didn't have a shower. She didn't have no place to clean herself up. Probably hadn't eaten anything that day. But what was she doing? She was cleaning up her environment. One little broom stroke at a time. She wasn't blaming a Mexican man or a Hispanic man that didn't come there to rescue her. She was doing what little she could to make her little world better. She didn't worry about what people thought of her, about what people called her. She was doing what she could to make her world better. I think that's all I have to say. I think I'm all talked out. So until next time, this is BGS out.